Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a zombie fiction author who has written two zombie fiction series of novels, the Undead Age series and the Steel City Apocalypse series. Her name is A.M. Geever, and here's my interview with her. A.M. Geever, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you so much for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. My name is Annie, though I write using my initials. And I have been publishing books since 2019. And I write in the post-apocalyptic genre so far with zombie fiction, though I have some plans to branch out into other subgenres of post-apocalyptic. And I've always loved to write, always loved to read, and I get to play make believe for a living, and that's a pretty good gig.
I'm going to start with the first of your two series, the Undead Age, and you've written three books in that series. Love in an Undead Age, Damage in an Undead Age, and Reckoning in an Undead Age. Without spoiling too much of the series in each book, what is the series and each book in it about?
Well, the Undead Age is set 10 years after the zombie apocalypse. When I first started writing, I didn't want to do what everybody else did, so I didn't want to do the beginning. And basically, the series is about a group of people who are trying to, let me back up. There is a cure for the zombie virus in the Undead Age, but it's very tightly controlled by a group of people who use it to keep power. So the overarching story is the efforts of a group of people, of whom my heroine is one, to try and get a hold of this cure and reproduce it elsewhere so that they can break this monopoly. They can break the monopoly. They can change the balance of power, and they can maybe hopefully someday give humans a fighting chance. And so that's the overarching series. The main character is a woman who she's what I wish I could be in the zombie apocalypse in some ways, minus 10 years of therapy. She is really tough and very smart, resourceful, but she's also, got a lot of baggage around surviving, because she's had to do a lot of really crappy things to survive. And it's been a very traumatic experience for anybody. So basically the whole series is about her growth and the challenges she faces, and under the umbrella of trying to do this really difficult mission under really extraordinary circumstances. And there's a love interest, obviously, and they face a lot of challenges. So it's a really good adventure story with a bit of a love story too.
You've written three books in the Steel City Apocalypse series, although only two of them are available for purchase right now, Undead Menagerie and Undead Sanctuary, with the third, Undead Impact, available for pre-order as of the date this interview was recorded. Without spoiling too much of the series and each book, what is the series and each book about, and do you have a release date set for Undead Impact?
I'll start with the last. I do not have a release date for Undead Impact yet. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. They're dumb dogs are barking. I do not have a release date for that yet, but I'm hoping to have it out this summer. So Steel City Apocalypse is a more traditional take on the zombie apocalypse. It's set in Pittsburgh, my hometown, and it's set at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse when they first appear and everything's falling apart. It's the same universe, it's the same zombie apocalypse, but it's in a different place at a different point in time with completely different characters. So my main character, female character, is a zookeeper, and she ends up meeting up with my main male character, who is an electrician. and they end up trapped at the zoo. So the first one is about them and the people they find themselves with trying to figure out what's going on and how to survive. The second book in the series, Undead Sanctuary, is there's a group of people, among them my two main characters, Imogen and Mike, who have, fled to a less populated area. And the third book kind of brings in a completely different character. Um, and with the idea that maybe they'll all meet up eventually. And it's set in my hometown in Pittsburgh, and it's been a lot of fun because I'm able to incorporate a lot of things that are unique about the city, about the people from my hometown, and that's been an awful lot of fun.
What drives you to write zombie fiction?
You know, writing zombies in a way was kind of a lark because I was trying to figure out when I first decided to write what to write. And at first I thought I might try writing some kind of chick lit romance book, except I don't really read those kind of books. So my ideas were really awful. And one day I was said to my husband after I told him my really crappy idea, I was like, well, too bad it can't have zombies in it. And we both kind of looked at each other and were like, that's it. So, but what I like about post-apocalyptic fiction, and zombies, are just one flavor of it, is the extremity of the circumstances and the stakes, which are always very high, very life and death. Um, and I like those because you could really take characters and you can push and push and push them. Um, and then you can explore the many different ways that people react to these stresses. And what I like about zombies in particular is like zombies are kind of a really cool kind of monster. Because first off, they don't exist in real life, obviously, and thank goodness. But there's a little more flexibility around what zombies are versus like something that is more an older entity. Like vampires have been around as an idea since like the 1500s or earlier. So there's a lot of lore around them, and you know that's I guess it could feel kind of confining. Whereas with zombies, the modern day zombie genre is only a couple years older than I am, because the first George Romero film was made in 1968, and before that, the idea of zombies in film was the classic um, Caribbean zombies out of the voodoo tradition. So so it was a very different thing. So I like that it's a newer subgenre so that there's a lot more flexibility. I like using zombies to make social commentary, which is what George Romero did. And the fun thing about social commentary is people either notice it or they don't. And either way, people can enjoy it. And oh, and there was a third thing I liked about zombies, and it just totally slipped out of my head. But there's just zombies don't require research. That's another thing I really like about zombies, because I've done a lot of school. I was always a good student. I have a master's degree, and it's not that I don't like to learn about things because I do, but I don't like to do a lot of research when I'm writing. And obviously I do some, but I don't like to do like really hardcore research. And I don't like to have to write things where the readers are going to be the kind of people who know the subject inside and out and really like expect it to be a particular way, like with like people who write EMP post-apocalyptic fiction, like there are some do's and don'ts. Like EMPs work in a particular way, and I find it really stressful to like always be making sure that I've got all these things right. And quite frankly, I would rather be writing than researching. So that's another thing I like about zombies because there's a lot more flexibility. You can decide they're going to be a particular way because, if anybody, was like, well, why are they that way? It's like, well, because they're imaginary and they're dead. And I mean, that's our starting point. So there's a bit more flexibility there.
There's a lot of social commentary in your books, ranging from critiques of healthcare to social class. Is that an important part of your writing? And if so, why and how?
It is because, one of the things that artists do and have for as long as art has existed is reflect what's going on in their society and express how they're feeling about it or what they think about it. And so that is very important to me. And I also grew up in a very politically aware and active, social justice oriented family. And so that, is kind of ingrained in my DNA at this point. Where, I think we do have obligations as people and citizens to one another, and to the world the society we live in and the world we live on. And so, you could, so that is a very important part. The thing about social commentary, though, is that it almost has to, not be there, in my opinion. You want it to be there so that it is people who are interested in social commentary see it and recognize it, but you don't want it to be in the story to the point that it's disruptive and it pulls people out of the story. So it's a tricky thing to do, but I just find it really interesting. Like if anyone listening wants to watch like not Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, it's not actually a very good film from an objective standard. There's some parts of it that are brilliant and some parts of it that are really rough, and in a wow, this movie is not so great way. But in the first 5 minutes, George Romero is addressing, racism and police brutality, and he's doing it all in the context of this story. And it's there's a riot, and there are political motivations for the people who are being chased by the police, which was really common. There were a lot of liberation movements in the 70s when this film was made, or in early 80s. And some of the police officers are really racist and using really racist language. And some of them aren't. Some of them are themselves people of color. So it's really interesting because like he's got this thing happening right at the beginning of the film, and it's really intense, and it's a good story. It also has all this subtext about American culture at the time. And not everybody's going to look at that and think, oh, wow, this is a social critique of, but some of us see it and we do, we're like, whoa, that's like really intense. So that's what I'm talking about, where like you want it to be part of the story rather than something that detracts from the story.
Why did you decide to self-publish and go the independent route instead of going the traditional publishing route for your books?
Mostly because I did not want to have to waste time trying to chase down an agent who would then have to spend time trying to sell my book to a publisher who would then have to take a year or two to get a book out. People do that and never get their books published, and I really wanted to get my books out into the world. I also, this is not the case for everyone, but, some people really want to go the traditional route because they want that external validation of being told that yes, your book is good enough. And I did not need that. I did not need somebody to tell me my book was good enough. I knew my book was good enough. I knew that there were people out there who would like it. Hopefully more of them than than not. And I also so that's why I went indie, and I'm really glad I did because the community I found amongst other independent authors is just really great. It's very supportive and generous, and I've made some really wonderful friends, and I like being able to call the shots, and the upside of that is that like I get to make the decisions and I get to decide about things I wouldn't get to decide about um, if I was traditionally published, like covers or just one thing. The downside of that is it's all on me. And so if things don't go well, it's because I made a decision that turned out to be the wrong thing. Um, but if you can keep your mind open in terms of those kind of things that might blow up or fall flat and just look at them as learning experiences, then you can like try and do it a better job next time. But mostly I didn't feel like I needed other people to tell me my books were good enough, and I didn't want to spend years not having my books published.
An interesting thing you do is that you sell your books directly via your website. Why and how
Mm-hmm.
did you make this available as an option for those who want to purchase your books?
I started that about a year ago, I guess, or within the last year. And selling books direct has is really a big thing in the independent author community, um, because every book that I sell via a retailer like Google or Barnes and Noble or Amazon or what have you, um, I'm getting a cut of the book. And depending on the retailer, it can be anywhere from 30 to 70%, And then some retailers will charge delivery fees. So basically, the amount, which is ridiculous because they're already running these servers, like it's not costing them anything to do that. But basically, the reason I went independent or decided to try direct sales was because it's a couple of reasons. One, I make more money um per unit of whatever I sell versus selling through a retailer. Secondly, I those people are my customers. My readers who buy from Amazon, they are my readers, but they are not my customers. So there's no way for me to have the same kind of connection in terms of selling to them and understanding what kind of things they're interested in buying and how they make those decisions and whatnot. Another reason I decided to do stuff from direct is that I do Comic Cons, and like next month I'm going to be at Steel City Con here in Pittsburgh, and I decided to give that a try after a friend encouraged me, and like there is nothing like going out and meeting people and just chewing the fat and and hearing what they're interested in and whatnot, and whether people buy books from me at a Comic Con or not. I enjoy meeting people so much. I'm a real extrovert, and it's a lot of and that also was a big reason of why I decided to have an online store, because that direct experience with people is just it's so important as a writer. I mean, it's important as a business person too, but as somebody who is trying to forge an emotional connection with the readers, because if there's no emotional connection, people aren't going to keep reading a fiction book, because why should they when there's another one that might where they'll get that. That's so important, and it's important for the writer, and it's a great inspiration, when you're at a Comic-Con and somebody buys your book, or somebody comes back and was like, oh my gosh, I loved it, I want the next book, and then you can talk to them about, well, what did you like and what annoyed you and that kind of a thing. It's just a much more authentic human experience. And I get that even with online direct sales, because I end up having a more direct connection with people, because I'm able to I get their email address and they can be on my newsletter, and I can keep in touch, and they can learn about me, and people write me back all the time, and I learn stuff about them.
What advice do you have for those who want to write and or publish independently?
My first bit of advice would be to work on the craft of writing. Learn as much as you can, and you never stop, but learn as much as you can about becoming a good writer and becoming a better writer. Read books about writing, find a writing group if you can. The thing that where I learned the most about how to put together a story and story structure and just the different aspects of pulling a good story together was in a writing group, and you don't want to be the best writer in the writing group. You want other people to be better than you, because that's where you get a good learning experience. But writing groups are really valuable. The other thing, and sometimes that first writing group is not the right one. You might have to cast about a little bit, but writing groups are good, not just for learning how to become a writer, but and become a better writer, but they're also good for community, because writing is a pretty solitary activity. I would also say, get on Facebook or Discord or whatever kind of platform you like, and look for other authors. There are so many author groups, and people are by and large really awesome and really great and very willing to help you. And that's really, really helpful. And then the third thing I would say is that it's a long haul, and you can have a lot of different motivations, and you might not know what your motivation is, but and they can change over time, but it helps if you can figure out what yours is about. Like, some people just want to do writing, as a side gig that they do for fun, and if they can make some money at it, great. And if not, that's fine too. Some people really want it to be like their full-time career, where they can support their families and stuff. And and then everything in between. So it's really clear. It's helpful to get a clear idea of what it is you want to achieve, and to remember that it's going to take a long time. Most people do not have a big hit right out of the gate. And then also, even if you are somebody who wants to make money, to realize that, like, right, money wasn't why you started writing, to not measure everything by money. And it's really easy to forget that. And earlier this week, I had forgotten that. And was feeling like a failure because I wasn't having the sales I wanted, for that week. And then I had a moment where I was like, well, this is a really dumb measure, because this isn't why you started writing. So it's helpful to also remind yourself, because it's easy to get caught up in, oh, well, I'm gonna do this, and I want to do that, and to start measuring yourself by metrics that really aren't indicative of whether or not you are a good writer or a successful writer or a writer who writes books that people really want to read.
I have one final question. Even though none of your books are purely romance, why do you believe that every great story is a love story? And what is the difference between love stories and romance?
Well, I would say the difference between romance and a love story is romances romance stories generally end when the people get together. Romances are about the possibilities and the how of people meet and fall in love. A love story can be about love for a lot of different things. It can be about a romantic love, but it can also be about the love of a child or a family or an idea or your country, or it can be a love story. It has a wider range. It doesn't have to necessarily be a romantic kind of story. And I generally find that even when you look at most stories, whether it's a movie or a book or whatnot, there is some little kernel of something people love motivating why they're doing what they're doing. Um, and so that's why I think that most good stories are love stories.
A.M. Geever, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an amazing and insightful guest.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I have really enjoyed this very, very much.
It was wonderful to interview A.M. about her written works, and I'll include a link to her online bookstore in the text description of this episode. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.